Hey everyone, Kelsey here, and welcome back to Gal. Today we're doing another beginner's guide video, and this time we're focusing specifically on video exporting and encoding. So that way you'll know how to export and become a pro at exporting for any type of platform that you need. So what exactly will you walk away with after you watch this video tutorial? Well, of course, you're going to learn the basics of how to do just quick exports of your content, but you're also going to learn the tech behind the exports, such as, what is bitrate and how to adjust it to alter your file size and still maintain really top quality. So I'll also cover how to do specific types of exports, such as how to export for broadcast TV or Netflix, and how to export for social media, and some special types of exports, like how to export a frame of your video, how to export with an alpha channel, or exporting audio and exporting GIFs. I'll also be answering some questions I got on Twitter at the very end of this video about a very specific export need, so stay tuned for that. And a special thanks to Wondershare for sponsoring today's video with their new app, Uniconverter. It's your complete video toolbox, and I will tell you more about how awesome they are later in this video, but for now you can claim your 30-day trial using my link in the description box. Thanks Wondershare, and let's go ahead and jump into the video. Just a reminder that all the time codes are just down below. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So before we jump into specific types of exports, I'm going to give you an overview of the entire export settings dialog. There are two ways to export. The first quick way is to go to the quick export file icon on the right, which is a new feature that will allow you to do quick exports. And this is best for exporting for social, but I'll show you this later on. And then the way to access all of Premiere Pro's export settings is to go to File, Export Media, or use the shortcut Command M on a Mac or Control M on a PC. And remember, in order for the export window to pop up, you need to make sure your sequence is selected. Just select it here in the timeline and you'll see a blue outline around the window. First, inside of this new window, you'll see a preview of your exported video on the left. If you click on the Source tab, from here, you'll be able to crop the video if you want to export in a smaller cropped portion in a lower resolution. Now, this might be helpful if you want to export a GIF, which we will cover later in this video. And below that, you'll see the duration of the full video in the lower right, just below the video preview. Below that, you'll see that there's a source range. If you have in and out points set in your timeline, you will also see the source range here. If you're not sure what this is, if I close out the export settings and go back to my timeline, you'll see that I have a highlighted in and out point. Now, I recommend doing this if you have a longer sequence and you only want to export a portion of the video in the timeline. You can press I on your keyboard to set your in point, and you can move your playhead to the end of your video and press O as your out point on your keyboard. If you want the in point to just be the beginning of the timeline, you only need to set an out point, as the beginning will default as your in point. Now, the reason why I always set in and out points is that when I'm editing my video, sometimes I'll forget that I'll put a video clip farther down in the timeline, and then when I export the full video, it'll export the entire sequence, even with that portion at the end, which you don't want, which is why I always set an out point at the very last frame of my video. On the right, these are the settings. Here's where you'll choose your format and preset. The default is the H.264 format and match source high bitrate. So this is the most commonly used format and preset for social media for 1080p. And it's what I use for this YouTube video and for all of my YouTube content that I upload in 1080p. And I'll tell you more about specific formats and presets when I cover the specific types of exports later in this video. Next to preset, you'll also have the option to save a preset if you make any custom modifications, or you can import a specific export preset that you're given. Below the format and presets, you can click to change your output name and location and the place where your final video will be saved. And just below the output name, you'll see two checkboxes. If you want to export the video and audio, make sure both of these are checked. And down below here, you'll see 6 tabs. The first one is the Effects tab. And this allows you to apply different types of effects on top of your exported media, such as LUTs and looks, which might be useful if you want to export just a specific clip for a stock video clip that you're selling, and you can apply a specific LUT on top of the footage itself. There's also SD conform, which allows you to convert HDR video to SDR for playback on non-HDR devices. There's also a place for watermarks, so you can add an image, name, or timecode overlay that will allow you to create really cool custom watermarks on your footage for review. And there's Time Tuner that'll allow you to shave off time of your video, and Premiere Pro will automatically shave the time off for you. And I'll show you how to do this later on. There's also a video limiter, which will make sure that the brightness levels and the color values of your video are broadcast safe. And there's also a loudness normalization checkbox here, which will allow you to choose the loudness standard to make sure it fits the broadcast standard for audio loudness. Next to that is the video tab, and this is the most commonly used tab. And this lets you customize the output file's basic video settings, such as the resolution, the frame rate, the encoding settings, and by the way, you'll want to make sure you're using hardware encoding because it's much faster and it leverages the power of your graphics card, not just the bottleneck of your CPU. And you can adjust the bitrate quality, which we will cover in the next chapter. Lastly, you'll also be able to enable VR if you shot in 360 video. The third tab is the audio tab, and you don't really use this that often, but it lets you control the audio format settings and the bitrate as well. And the fourth is the multiplexer tab. This is really only relevant for H.264 or MPEG formats, but essentially it controls how the video and the audio are merged together or exported separately. So if it's set to none, the video and audio files will be exported as separate files, but if it's on the default, then it will be mixed together as one MP4 file. Next are the captions. We will go into more detail on this later in the video, but essentially it allows you to burn your captioning track into the video or export a separate captioning file to go along with your video export. Now, I actually recently made an updated video on the captioning workflow in Premiere Pro, and if you have not watched that yet, you can just click up here to see how it works. And lastly, there is the publishing tab here. Essentially, it allows you to log into a specific social platform like Twitter or YouTube, and Premiere Pro will auto-publish your video file to that platform for you automatically, so it saves you a bit of time. So these are the tabs, and below here are a few more options that are less common, but certainly useful. First, there's the maximum render quality. If you're exporting your final video in a different resolution than the original, use maximum render quality. If you're exporting in the same resolution, don't check this because it'll actually increase your export time. Now, I'll cover more of this in the broadcast section so you fully understand how it works. Next, there's the use previews. If you choose this option, it'll speed up your export. And what it does is it'll export using the already generated preview files in your timeline instead of re-rendering all of the new media over again. So if you want to speed up your export time, you can check the box use previews, but make sure to watch the full video through to make sure everything's okay, because if you have use previews selected, there may be some errors that occur from those preview files. So just be careful with this. It does speed it up though. Another thing is the proxies. If this is checked, Premiere Pro will export using the already generated proxy files from the sequence instead of rendering new media. And this will also speed up your export. If you're new to proxies, essentially they are smaller replicas of your full res media. So you can, edit faster inside of your timeline using the proxy files instead. And you can watch my full tutorial right up here that shows you how to create your own proxies. So for example, if you're editing 8K footage or 4K footage, you may want to create lower res versions so that way you can speed up your editing workflow. And next, there's the set time code. If you want to change the specific start time of your export, you can type in a new time code here. I don't use this very often, but it's useful if you need to add in a specific time code for the start point. The next thing is time interpolation. Now you can ignore this if you're exporting your video in the same frame rate as your source media in your timeline. But let's say you're exporting your video that's in your timeline 30 frames per second, but you're exporting it to 24 frames per second, for example. Then you will want to pay attention to this because you will want to play around with the different time interpolation options to see which result is better. Frame sampling, this duplicates or removes the frames to achieve a new frame rate. And sometimes this can produce some stuttering on the playback, which is why there's other options to play around with. Next, there's frame blending, and this adds or removes frames by blending them with the adjacent frames, and this can result in some smoother playback. And lastly, there's optical flow, and this adds or removes frames by creating new frames based on the pixels of the surrounding frames. Now, this will create the best playback, but sometimes you might get some artifacts that are produced, so in that case, you may want to use the frame blending or the frame sampling. Lastly, at the bottom here, you'll see the estimated file size for H.264 MP4 exports, and this number will change when you adjust the bitrate, which we will cover later on in the next section. And now there are two options for export. There's the queue and there's export. Now, queue is the exact same as export, but when you press Q, it'll actually export the file and open up a new app called Adobe Media Encoder. And the reason why this is beneficial is that it uses a separate app to export, so you can still continue to use Premiere Pro. You can start editing a new project, or you can queue up another export. But when you export just with Premiere Pro, it uses Premiere Pro to export and you can't do anything more. They still use the exact same engines, but the benefit is that Adobe Media Encoder allows you to continue to use Premiere Pro. So here's just a quick editor's note about the export settings. Right now, the Premiere Pro team is working on a beta version of the export settings. So if you use the Premiere Pro public beta from Adobe Creative Cloud, you will see right now that they're working on a new user interface. Now, everything that I'm talking about in this video is still relevant. It's just going to be located in different spots. So on the left, you'll see some social export settings, but you'll see that some things are in different places, but the different codecs and all of the formats that I'll be talking about are still the same, just in a new interface. So if you want to try this out and give feedback to the Premiere Pro team, you can just go to the Adobe Creative Cloud desktop app, go to the beta app icon, download the Premiere Pro public beta, and you can try out the new export window. So that's all just a little side note for this. And now let's go jump into the next part of the video. So all that bitrate is the amount of video data that's processed in a unit of time. And video bitrate is measured in megabits per second. So if you have 10 megabits per second on your video, that's 10 million bits processed per second. Now, understanding how this works, megabits, you may be like, okay, great, well, how does that help me? Well, the best way to understand it is that if you increase that amount, it improves the quality of the export, but it also makes your video file size bigger. And if you lower that quality, it's going to reduce the file size and make your quality just a little bit more poor. Now, something to keep in mind, another thing that impacts the quality of your video and the size of your file is the frame rate and the resolution of your video. To give you an example of how frame rate and resolution factor in addition to the bitrate to the overall quality, let's say you have a 480p video that you've put into a 1080p sequence and you're exporting it as 1080p. Increasing the bitrate is simply going to just make the file size bigger. It's not going to improve the overall quality of the video because the pixel data of that 480 video is just being enlarged into the 1080p frame. So you also have to remember that just increasing the bitrate isn't going to increase the quality necessarily. So the most common reason that you're going to be adjusting your video bitrate is if you have a very long video and you still want the quality to be great. So for example, if you're uploading an hour-long video to YouTube in 1080p, what's the optimal bitrate so you can get the file size down? So different presets will come with different starting bit rates that you can adjust. For example, the default here, H.264 match source high bitrate. If you go down to the video bitrate settings, you'll see that the default is VBR 1 pass, 10 megabits per second. And the VBR, it just stands for variable bitrate, which is ideal for social media and streaming video because the bitrate changes based on the level of detail in the image. So the slower the scenes are, it uses less bits than the faster scenes. And the benefit of using VBR is that it can create a much more higher quality video with keeping the size down. You'll also see that there's VBR 2 pass, and all this does is essentially do a second pass through the video to ensure the quality is good, and usually this takes a little bit longer. You'll also see another option, CBR, which is constant bitrate. This keeps the bitrate the same throughout, and it will also produce a slightly larger file, but not by a lot. So when you're exporting CBR, VBR, or VBR 2 pass, when you watch those back, if you export the same video in all those different bitrate formats, you're not going to really see a difference from the human eye. But VBR is recommended primarily for social media because it helps keep the file size down. So now we're going to talk about bitrate and resolution and kind of what is the ideal bitrate when you're dealing with different resolutions. For my 1080p YouTube videos, I tend to use this default high bitrate, which is 10. And if I want to lower the file size down, or if I want to lower it a bit, typically I just like to go down to maybe 6 or 8 at the lowest. But remember, it also depends on your resolution. So 1080, 10 megabits per second is good for YouTube, and we'll talk more about this in the social media section. But if you're exporting 4K, you don't want it to be at 10, you want it to be much higher. For YouTube, they recommend between 40 and 60 megabits per second for 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, or 30 frames per second, which is the lower frame rates. And for the higher frame rates, they recommend 65 to 85 megabits per second. So as you increase the frame rate, you can see that the file size got a lot bigger because we switched to 4K. So now some of you might know why I upload in 1080p, because when you do 4K, it's so much bigger, and the same for 8K as well. It'll just eat up so much more space if you're doing weekly, even daily content in 4K. And 1080p, in my opinion, is still great quality for streaming on web. And now that we're talking about resolution and bitrate, a new preset that's now available is adaptive bitrate. And you might think, oh, it's very similar to variable, right? Well, actually, it's a lot different. Adaptive, what it actually does is it will automatically calculate the best bitrate for the resolution of your source footage. To give you an example of the difference between the regular bitrate and the adaptive bitrate, if you open up a 4K video and you choose to export as match source high bitrate, and we go to the video bitrate settings, you'll see it's still at 10, which is just ideal for HD, not 4K. But this is where the adaptive comes in handy. This is where you can use adaptive and it will automatically calculate the bitrate for you, making the file size bigger, and you don't have to worry about increasing the bitrate to 40, for example, for YouTube. And this is why adaptive bitrate is now the go-to preset for quick exports. So that way you don't have to worry about changing the bitrate for the resolution of your video. And now it's time for a short coffee break. Grab your espresso or tea, soak in all that lovely information about bitrate, and let's move on to the next chapter. For TV or film festivals, go to Format, and instead of H.264, choose QuickTime. And the most common preset to choose is Apple ProRes 422. And ProRes 422 is best for all 8-bit video formats, which is the minimum for broadcast. And by the way, Apple ProRes has been available in Premiere Pro on Windows since 2018. You might also wonder what's the difference between the 422, the regular one, 422 HQ, and LT. The only difference is the data rate. So you're not going to really see a visual difference on the exports between these. The only difference is that you'll see a huge difference in the file size. The HQ version will be a lot bigger. You'll also see there's the 4444 Apple ProRes, and that's for exporting high dynamic range footage, and I recommend doing that for animation as well. But more often than not, you will use 422. So when you export the ProRes 422, which is large by the way, you'll see it's about 1 gigabyte per minute. but you won't actually see the file estimate down here below like we did when we had H.264. Another question you might have is when you scroll down on the video tab, there are options for render at maximum depth. If your video has a lot of color grading or compositing, definitely select render at maximum depth because it renders content at 32-bit color depth. Checking it will also increase the export time, but it will be worth it. And then there's the use at maximum render quality. You might think, well, yeah, I want it to be at maximum render quality, so let's check it. But actually this here is only for when you're exporting your video in a different resolution than your sequence. So if you have a 4K video sequence and you're exporting it in 1080p, then you'll want to select this because it helps preserve the details in the final export. This will also increase the export time significantly. So remember, if you're just doing a quick export, you can leave this unchecked. But for the final export that's in a different resolution, always have this checked. So now let's go a little bit more in detail into exporting for social media. The best format to use for 4K video is H.264 with the preset match source adaptive bitrate. So this match source adaptive bitrate will work for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok because it matches the source settings and it calculates the best bitrate and quality for your video for you. And it will also export in whatever resolution you have. So if you have vertical, it'll be in the vertical format, square, and so on. You'll also notice that Premiere Pro also has some specific presets specifically for the platform. There's Facebook 1080p, there's Facebook Ultra HD, Facebook 720p, and the only main difference here is that Premiere Pro gives you a specific bitrate that's been entered in as the ideal bitrate for that platform. And of course you can adjust this bitrate if you need to. For example, according to Facebook, there is no bitrate limit as long as your file doesn't exceed 1 gigabyte. But 8 megabits per second is generally best for 1080p video for Facebook, so you can just adjust it to 8. There's also presets for Twitter, Vimeo, and YouTube, and you can certainly use those. So you may ask, should I be using these presets for my social media exports, or should I just do what you said in the opening, which is match source adaptive bitrate? I would recommend just using the match source adaptive bitrate because it already has a great bitrate that you can use and it will automatically calculate it for the resolution that you're working on. And you know, Premiere Pro is constantly updating and social media is updating too. So Premiere Pro settings might be a little bit out of date with the latest social media export settings. So using the match source adaptive bitrate will help you never go wrong. One more thing that might be useful for you is exporting videos that have a specific time limit and your final video is just a little bit longer than that time limit. For example, with Instagram, their in-feed videos has a limit of 60 seconds. Let's say your final video is 62 seconds or 63 seconds and you need to get it down to 60, but you're like, how do I do it? All the edits are pretty groomed up. Well, you can use Time Tuner inside of the export settings, which I told you about in the opening. So how does it work? All you need to do is go to Time Tuner from Effects, and here you can enter in your new target duration, your desired length of your video, and then use the target duration preset, and Premiere Pro will automatically go through your video and remove any slower frames from your video in order to cut out the extra seconds without removing any spoken parts, which is pretty sweet. Now, Time Tuner is not perfect in all situations. For example, if you have a minute and 40-second video and you need to get it down to 60 seconds, that's not gonna work. It only really works if you have a little couple extra seconds that you need to shave off. For social media today, captions are super important to add onto your videos, and with the new captioning workflow in Premiere Pro, it's easier than ever. So once you have your captioning track set up, all you need to do to burn it into your video is go to File, Export Media, go to the Captions tab, and make sure that burning captions in your video is on. Now for YouTube, I don't burn my captions in. I like to export the captioning track as its own separate .srt file. So this is where I go into the text panel and I go to the ellipsis menu and export to .srt. And that way I can attach the .srt captioning file to my YouTube video as I upload it. Now, there are many different types of captioning formats, and that all depends on how you set up your captioning track. And if you're interested in how that is set up, you can watch my full captioning video right up here. One more thing about social is publishing. So going back to the publishing tab here, essentially this allows you to publish your video while you export at the same time. So if you want to publish it to your Adobe Creative Cloud or Behance profile, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo, all of those here, there's no Instagram here and there's no TikTok. But if you want to publish to social media, I actually recommend using Premiere Rush because they have integrations for TikTok and Instagram. So to get it to work, you just log into the account and you allow Adobe Creative Cloud to manage the account and publish to your channel for you. So you would just update your title, you'd put in a description here, and I'd actually recommend setting the privacy to private so that way you can always modify the tags a little bit more and make sure everything looks good in YouTube before you publish. And you can also upload a custom thumbnail, which they didn't have before. One thing I really wish that this section had was to auto publish your captions as a .srt as well. Since it has the new captioning workflow in here, it would be great if the Premiere Pro team would allow you to add the captioning track as a .srt directly to YouTube as well to save that extra step to have to export it separately, which is one benefit I could see it having. So since we're still on the topic of social media, I thought it would make sense to show you how to export a GIF, which is just an image sequence, a short little image sequence of your video. So how does it work? So once you have the piece of video you want to export as a GIF from your timeline, I recommend setting an I for the in point and an O for the out point. And I wouldn't recommend having GIFs be longer than 5 seconds. I even like them to be around 3 seconds in duration. So once you have the in and out point selected, then you can go to export by hitting Command M on a Mac or Control M on a PC. And from the format here, you're going to select animated GIF. If we just export using the default settings, the final GIF file is going to be huge and you wouldn't be able to attach it to your social media post. So this is why you need to actually play around with the video settings here to get this video file down. So we're gonna go to the video tab, and from the basic video settings, we're going to reduce the quality way down to like around 20 or 30. And this may seem pretty drastic, but in order to get the file size down, we need to lower that. And we also need to uncheck the box next to the width and the height to reduce the resolution down to also get the file size down. So here I'm just going to divide this by using the backslash symbol for divide, and I'll divide it by 4. And this will automatically reduce the resolution down to 4 for both the width and the height because the resolution link here is on, which allows for the scaling of the frame size to be proportional. Now, once that we've lowered this, let's hit export, and now we have a much lower file size and a decent quality GIF that we can attach, for example, to Twitter. And every GIF will be different. You may have to just divide it by 3 instead of 4 like I did, or you need to lower the quality even more. It really depends on the duration of that GIF, right? To adjust those settings and tweak it until you get it to the right file size. Generally, a good GIF file size is around 3 megabytes. And so now I'm going to tell you about today's sponsor, Wondershare Uniconverter. So Uniconverter is a really fast converting tool. So if you need to convert multiple videos into different formats, it's also a DVD burner, it's also a video trimmer. There's lots of different things you can do. It has a whole toolbox of different tools that you can use. Now you might be like, well, Gal, why would I need Uniconverter when Adobe Premiere Pro has Adobe Media Encoder? Well, Adobe Media Encoder is great for the formats that work within Adobe, but Wondershare Uniconverter actually works with 1,000 different types of presets. So there's a lot more to choose from, and the render speed is super fast. They have a new version now that's up to 200 times faster. So one way that Uniconverter can help you save time with your editing versus just using Premiere Pro is the video merging tool. So for example, if you shoot with a camera that will automatically save large files into multiple different files, you can use their video merger and it will just export it into one full video for you that you can then import and continue editing in Premiere Pro, which I'm sure a lot of you guys would find useful. Another thing that it could be useful for is one time I was filming actually for a YouTube video and I forgot to change the settings. So I accidentally recorded my talking head in 720p at 60 frames per second instead of my normal, which is 1080p 24 frames per second. So I used Wondershare Uniconverter to export my bad file type into 1080p 24 frames per second, so that way it just looked better when I was editing in Premiere Pro. So that's one other useful tool. Another really cool tool is downloading YouTube videos with Uniconverter. So a lot of times for educational references, I'll download a YouTube video that I'll insert in my video and I'll just copy and paste the link and it will download it for me, and I have a whole archive of all the videos that I've downloaded. And remember to follow copyright rules. I'm only using these YouTube videos for fair use when I'm trying to explain something. So use this tool with caution. And talking about bitrate, the compression inside of Uniconverter is great. It makes it really easy to do. So if you need to reduce the file size significantly, you don't really have to deal with bitrate. You just reduce it by a percentage, and it makes it really easy. If you need to save space on your local drive, you can just take your final video and quickly compress it. And the best part is Uniconverter works on both a Mac and a PC, and you can get a lifetime license, which is a great deal. So you just buy it once and you have it forever. There's also annual plans as well and monthly plans for the online version. And by the way, you can get the online version a 30-day trial using my link below. So thank you so much to Wondershare for sponsoring, and let's go ahead and jump back into our beginner's guide on video exporting. So let's say that you're exporting a video for review for a film festival or just for somebody else to just take a look at, but you want to protect your video with a watermark. This is where we're going to go to the Effects tab of the export settings. The first option is to add an image overlay. So if you have a custom logo or a watermark that you want to add to your video, simply select the file from the dropdown. For example, I'll add the white version of my Gal logo. Then you can resize it and you can lower the opacity so it doesn't look like the graphic is part of the video. And now when you export, the watermark will burn into the video itself. Instead of the classic logo watermark, you can also add a name overlay. So you can choose prefix and suffix and you can type whatever name that you want. For example, you might want to just add the name of the project or the director or the date of the project. And then you can change the position and use the offset controls to bring it into place. And then you can adjust the size and the opacity as well. You might also be asked to add an overlay as a time code on the video, especially for film festival reviews, so people can see what time it has in the video. So you can just use this to enable a time code overlay and you can adjust the position accordingly. So now that you have to do watermarks, what if you want to save this? So that way you can always use this watermark going forward. This is where we can talk about saving custom presets that you can use so you don't have to redo everything that you've changed every time you export. So when you make a customization like adding a watermark, you'll get a preset name that's been replaced with the word custom. And all you have to do to save it is click on the little save preset icon next to the preset name, and you can give it a name like watermark export or something. And after you save it, it will now appear in your preset dropdown. Another type of special export that you may need to do is exporting with an alpha channel. Let's say you do a logo reveal or a motion graphics template and you want to export it to share it with another editor with a transparency layer. Now, exporting with an alpha channel layer used to be a little bit more complicated, but now in Premiere Pro, they made it super easy, and this is how it works. Just like with the broadcast section, you'll want to choose the QuickTime format. And from presets, you're going to choose Apple ProRes 4444 with alpha. And you can also choose GoPro Cineform RGB 12-bit with alpha as well. That's another option. Then you can hit export and you'll have your motion graphic with the alpha channel. So that's how you export with alpha. And now let's talk about exporting audio. So I don't generally use the exporting audio feature inside of Premiere Pro specifically, but you may find it useful if you have a video podcast and you want to export just the audio of the video podcast for Spotify, iTunes, or another podcast platform. So this is how you do it. Press Ctrl M or Command M to bring up the export settings, and then you're going to select from the format AIFF or waveform audio format. Both of them will work the same. They're both uncompressed, high quality audio types. If you don't need uncompressed, you can export it as an MP3 and the file size will be a lot smaller. And that's really all you need to know about audio. And now let's talk about exporting stills. The best way to export a still image is not from the export settings. You actually can pull the playhead in your timeline to the frame you want to export, and this could be good, for example, for the thumbnail of your next YouTube video. Then click on this little camera icon from your program panel and export the frame. If you don't have this icon, just click on the plus icon here and drag it into your toolbar. And from here, you can choose the format and save the location. You can also import it into your project panel. And so this pretty much covers all the different types of exporting that you would need from Premiere Pro. And I did get a question from somebody on Twitter that was a really good question about Zoom recordings and how to best export it without reducing the quality even more. So I imagine in this case, a lot of you are asked to add lower thirds and some graphics on top of these long web recordings, and you've probably had to scale them up, or they're exactly 1080p, but they don't look that great. And so when you export it, it's a pretty long file, so it's probably a super big file. So in this case, I would just recommend, if it's 1080p and you've scaled up the video, I would still recommend exporting it in the match source high bitrate and just lowering the bitrate maybe down to like 6, so it's not super high. And if you wanted to, just like I showed you with the Uniconverter, you can use Uniconverter to compress the file a little bit without reducing the quality also. Another thing you might want to do if you're worried about scaling up the video inside of your timeline and it looks a little bit worse in quality, you can add a cool animating background and not scale up the video fully, but just make it part of the frame. So there's like a nice colorful border. And then you don't really have to worry about the quality reducing as much when you export. But if you do export in a different frame rate or resolution than your source settings, remember to always use maximum render quality. But again, I would just recommend using the match source high bitrate for 1080p and lowering that bitrate down until you get the right file size that you need. So that's all for this video. I know it was a long one, but I really wanted to fit in as much as possible in this one video so it could really be a comprehensive guide to possibly any question you could have about exporting and understanding bitrate. And if it helped you out, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up so that way I know that you want more beginner's guides on this channel. And thanks again to Wondershare for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to sign up for your 30-day trial just down below. And please do leave a comment below and let me know which beginner's guide you want next, and I'll be sure to take it into consideration to produce it for our next beginner's guide series. Thanks so much everybody for watching, and yeah, keep creating better video with Gal. See you next time. Bye.